Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile. Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll talk a lot about the New Orleans Saints. We'll talk about Nick Fairley. We'll get into LSU, Mississippi State. We have time. We'll get into the New Orleans Pelicans. And as always, we've got a fantastic panel for you tonight. Jude Young, SportsNola.com and WGSO Radio. Mike Fazende joins me each and every Friday in my first hour on WGSO Radio. Both guys returning to the show tonight. Gentlemen, welcome back. Thanks for coming down. Let the folks know a little bit about what you guys are involved in.
Well, I'll start and say I'm very busy with SportsNola.com, covering everything, including many of the topics we'll talk about tonight. And then, of course, on the side with Eric over at WGSO 990 AM New Orleans, I have a show a couple of nights a week on Tuesdays and Wednesdays from 6 to 7, the Jude Young Show, clearly talking sports, and all topics are welcome. And when basketball season rolls around, I am the voice of the UNO Privateers, and we're excited about the future after such a great season this past year under Mark Schlesinger.
Mike, welcome back. Tell the folks, they know that you and I are together on Fridays, but you also got a great blog as well.
Fazende on football. It's under the address mefootball1.blogspot. Or you can just Google Fazende on football.
There you go.
And I talk mostly football, but I'll throw other stuff in there. But mostly Saints and LSU, which is a lot of people care about around here.
And my go-to guy when it comes to college baseball. Always been informative when it comes to college baseball. Guys, let's start off. We'll get to LSU, Mississippi State, but the big news around here is Nick Fairley. and his future, first of all, you know, how he's doing physically just in his own life, okay? I mean, when you start talking about somebody who has an enlarged heart, that ultimately has to see multiple specialists. His career may be in jeopardy, but again, just hoping that he's going to be able to live, a life that's going to be healthy going forward. But, you know, it's a bottom line game, football, and he is being counted on to be a big time starter for this team after last year. 4 years, $28 million contract that he signed. And today, Sean Payton faced the New Orleans media after Jen Hale broke this story over the weekend about Nick Fairley and having to be able to see multiple specialists about a heart condition that may keep him out of football permanently, at least for this season. What we know is this. The Saints doctors, and I've been on the Saints doctors and the Pelicans doctors for a long time, but it was the Saints doctors in March that asked Fairley after a physical to be able to go out and see a specialist about the pre-existing condition and enlarged heart that he's had, I guess, most of his life. This was found out in the combine. Okay, so he's played since his rookie year, and beyond that, even obviously through his whole life, but his pro career, he's played with this. He had three opinions, and of the three opinions, one said that he could play football, from what we understand. One said that he should not play football, and they're waiting on a third opinion. Supposedly he's already saw that specialist. They're going to get a resolution on his future within the next couple of weeks. He's passed multiple physicals each and every year since the combine. And as I mentioned, it was Saints specialists, Saints doctors that said he should get checked out in March. Now that's the key time here, March. the question I've asked all week long is this: when did the Saints know? Was this an episode that Fairley went through? Why, and again, was this part of a routine physical when you sign a new contract? Did they find that out when they gave him his year-end physical on the way out at the end of the season? We found out, we don't know when in March, but we know March. That's what Sean Payton said today is March. And the question now is not so much about the Saints doctors on this situation, because the Saints doctors did their job, but for the front office and Sean Payton. If you found out about this in March, did you find out about it before you signed him to the long-term deal or after? And if you found out after, you still had time in free agency to be able to fill that defensive tackle spot with another defensive tackle in case he's not able to go. And then on the flip side of that is the draft. And I've talked about on this show and on my radio show the fact that Jonathan Allen from Alabama, who is going to be, again, if his shoulders hold up, and most people think that arthritic shoulders will hold up, it may shorten his career by a couple years, but ultimately he's going to be a bona fide, great defensive tackle in the NFL. He was available. We know that Barnett was available as a pass rusher. They went with Lattimore. They didn't address it anywhere else in the draft. Now, maybe down the line here, they're thinking Sheldon Rankins is going to be the guy, because I've talked about it on my radio show this week. They drafted Sheldon Rankins to be Nick Fairley. Nick Fairley came in on a one-year experiment, and maybe they're thinking, if Fairley can't go, we have a Fairley in Sheldon Rankins. The big question has always been, when did they know, and how did they deal with it? We know how they dealt with it now on the medical side, but there's a big question mark on not going out and filling a huge hole, if Nick Fairley is not going to be available for you this season. Jude, I'll turn it over to you first. What are your thoughts?
Well, you covered a lot of the key points there, and the only thing we can really focus on based on what we know right now is the Saints and their belief that Nick Fairley will be able to play, and if he's not able to play, that they're going to be okay without him. They must like their depth outside of just Rankins, the young players they have up front on the line. Davison is somebody who, as a nose tackle, played hurt last year and actually played very well. He's very good on rundown, so they like him, and he was going to play a lot anyway, next to, we presume, a lot of the time, either Rankins or Fairley. So they must feel comfortable with that. David Onyemata as a mid-round draft choice last year, a lot of potential. A couple of other undrafted free agents in the past couple of years. Justin Zimmer's a name perhaps to watch, who's got a great deal of talent but awfully raw. So they must feel like they're okay and they can coach those guys up without Fairley. But like you mentioned, this came to light in March, and we know he signed a one-year contract with the Saints a year ago, and we know this kind of issue couldn't have come up. So something's changed in a year. So there's a lot of scrambling to figure that out, but there shouldn't have been in March. Saints are clearly comfortable with the idea that either Fairley's going to play and whatever contract protections are there, I'm sure that the Saints are covered. And I know fans are worried about the salary cap too. I'm not going to worry about that till I hear otherwise. But again, will they be able to have enough production from that position? Who knows? But Fairley wants to play. That's the one thing that's clear here, because you come, first specialist says, you shouldn't play football anymore. And that's from the Saints' end of things before Fairley went out with his agent to find other opinions. It's clear this guy likes being in New Orleans. They got a lot out of him last year, and he wants to stay and finish out his career here. So he wants to play football. Chances are he's going to find the answers he wants to hear, and the Saints are going to be covered liability-wise, if I had to guess right now, because clearly the team isn't that worried about it.
Mike?
I mean, I agree. I think he plays, to be honest with you. The Saints doctor maybe was overly cautious, knowing he just signed a contract, and the Saints were in for a whole lot of money. And perhaps something came up. Listen, to diagnose an enlarged heart, there's just a couple of tests you have to do. One being a Doppler test, where they just take a Doppler on the weather, they just take of your heart, and that's just a routine test. And perhaps they find something on that, and they go to the next test, and then finally to see if there's an anomaly in there that they missed. And perhaps that happened, we don't know. But he's played thus far at an extremely high level with an enlarged heart. We know that. So unless he's a birth defect's been discovered, where there's maybe a atrial problem or aortic problem that he was born with, like Pete Maravich, that we all know about, I think he'll be fine. I think he'll continue to play. And of course, the Saints are going to cover their end and make sure they're not liable make it totally up to him in the end.
Yes.
To me, I think the season's gonna come. Nick Fairley's gonna play, and we'll forget about this.
Right. Well, that's the hope all the way around. Mm-hmm. Whether Nick Fairley plays or not, that he's going to be healthy for the rest of his life, his children, and ultimately his grandchildren down the line. One thing that Peyton said today, again, wanted to make sure that both the team and also Fairley was confident going into this so he could play 100%. He's had a reputation of again, kind of slacking off, especially after he gets paid. The last thing you want is a guy that ultimately maybe is worried about his heart down the line, is maybe playing for the love of the game and for the money, but ultimately maybe isn't giving the 110% that he gave last year. So they want to make sure he's comfortable, that he's not going to have any second thoughts, especially, it's a brutal physical game, football. So, that's part of this as well.
Well, Jude mentioned it. The depth the Saints have at tackle is pretty good now with the young guys. Mm-hmm. The guys Zimmer, Anyamata, Davidson, Rankins. There are guys there that you can rotate and make sure you keep Fairley fresh. You don't have to overexert him. And you want him in there on third down, and you want him in there fresh, especially in the third or fourth quarter if the Saints are trying to protect the lead. So, I think that's probably why they didn't address it in the draft. Perhaps they had an idea, maybe something was going on, but I'm not sure. When I first heard it, that was my reaction. Oh, they passed Jonathan out.
Right.
And they could have had the kid Jones from Ole Miss in the later rounds if they had any reservations about Fairley. But I think they thought with the depth they had, they're okay.
And it's funny that you mentioned Cam Jordan's versatility because that has to come into play as well. Saints are hoping by drafting a couple of young defensive ends to go with Alex Okafor that they're going to have some guys there that deserve playing time this year. And if they can coach them up because they made so many position coach changes, dealing with the front seven, the two big changes, maybe they're going to get more out of the talent that they weren't getting. So you gamble a little bit when it comes to young players, but you have to assume also the Saints didn't see anybody on the free agent market to say, we're thinking about giving this much money to Fairley if he plays. There's nobody else out there worth that. And I'm not sold that come draft time they would have, knowing that Fairley may not play. Let's say they thought at that point that he wasn't going to play. I still don't think they would have passed up by far the number one rated guy on their board in Marcus Lattimore to a position of greater need anyway, and they may not have been able to properly address it on their board later in the draft. We don't know what they were thinking at that pick other than there was a linebacker they were looking at that they couldn't get at 32, and they settled for an offensive lineman when clearly if they thought a defensive tackle was worthy at that spot, it would have made a lot of sense now that we know what we're hearing now.
And what we know is also what we don't know, honestly, okay? And that's part of this. You got a little bit out of Peyton. I'll give Peyton a lot of credit today. I know the media, the New Orleans media, really tried to drag this out of him today. He said as much as he really wanted to say, but he could have and would have been within his rights to say, guys, it's OTAs. I don't have to comment on any type of injuries to the first week of the season. We're going to let this lie until we know more about what's going on. But he tried to go through the timeline. I think he put the fan base at ease. And look, I want to say this again. This is not about media members in this city or breaking stories. This is about the ability for the fan base to be able to know what's going on with their team.
Right.
And again, the media is the conduit to the fan base. So by him opening up some and at least giving us at least an idea on the timeline, and again, it took a lot of pressure off the Saints doctors, which again is automatic in this town now, whether it's the Saints or Pelican doctors. Anytime something goes wrong physically with a player, all the fingers point there. And look, hey, I'll tell you, I was the guy that was driving the bus on that one.
And foolishness. Remember earlier in the offseason, Peyton was upset with a report coming out that, he wasn't able to answer first. And that kind of leak upset a coach. And somebody like Peyton, we know he's awfully sensitive about these things. Well, in this situation, he's taking the lead. First available chance with the media that he knew he was going to have. He did a pretty good job, Peyton's style of answering the questions. And what's a sensitive matter? I was pretty pleased with the way he answered the questions because until we know that third opinion, and apparently it's been in the last, 2 or 3 days that Fairley saw the physician. Till they know that, they really can't answer anything else, but they gave us all the rest of the information. So kudos to Peyton for not being secretive in a situation where, in this case, I think even the fans would have been able to understand he had the right to be.
Right. Mike, this is a situation where it's a little bit over the Saints' head in terms of ultimately what's going to happen here. I think the NFL gets involved here as well. No, the NFL does not want a player that has a heart condition that could ultimately, have a problem on the field.
Corey Stringer comes to mind.
There you go. First thing that came to my mind as well. Yeah. They're also going to be in a situation where, they may have something to say this bend down the line. Fairley may want to play. I mean, he's an athlete. He obviously has a lot of money coming to him if he continues to play. It may be the situation with the club and the league ultimately, if they don't like what the third opinion was, that they may have to say one way or the other.
The only opinion they're waiting for is whether or not he may need some kind of procedure done. Whether via catheter, open him up and go in and fix whatever's wrong. That's the only other thing that's possible that would cause him to miss time. Then it's a no-brainer. He doesn't play. So if he needs some kind of procedure or even surgery, he's out. But they would know that. It only takes a couple of tests to know that right away. Mm-hmm. One test is the bubble test. I mean, it's almost like testing for a flat tire. They put bubbles around the heart. If there's a leak or a hole or something, bubbles come up. And, we got a problem here. We got to move on to the next test. So I'm not sure what they're looking for. He's got an enlarged heart. They know that. And unless he's got something that he was born with, like a birth defect, or maybe he's got some clogged arteries, which you can see in an angiogram,
sure,
then I'm not sure what else they're looking for, to be honest with you.
Right. You guys feel pretty confident he will play this year?
I think he plays. I think they would have found it already.
Right.
It's not that much of a test to do.
I agree. I think it's a situation where you cover, CYA comes into play for this.
But that's the thing. They're covering their
the league and the team has to.
Right.
There's no doubt about that.
Because if something happens and something does happen to him, God forbid, then the NFL will be held liable.
He'll sign, and probably already has signed when he needs to sign, with multiple doctors backing up that he can play, that it's a manageable condition, and he'll agree to that. And hey, look, the Saints are taking a chance because they're still going to receive a whole lot of criticism if something happens to Nick Fairley on the practice field in a game. There's no question about that.
True.
But at the same time, if a player wants to play and there's some risk there, you can cover your bases and not deny him a right to play. He's a veteran who's been in the league long enough and played at a high level.
What fueled this also is the fact that teammates were trying to contact him and he wasn't returning their text or calls and kind of going into a bunker. Maybe the Saints told him, look, we don't want you talking to anybody, including teammates right now, till we know exactly what's going on. Speculation on my part. But that kind of fueled this as well. If there's a problem with you and you got a buddy on a team or a friend, you're normally going to confide in them, especially if you're going through, what may be a life-changing transition here.
Well, listen, the team physician, to my knowledge, is not a cardiologist.
No, he's not.
So he may have seen something that he wasn't quite sure about, and in his mind thought, this could be career ending, and let's just take it from there. At worst, his career's over. So let's go from here. And send him to a cardiologist, send him to the world's finest, wherever that may be. I happen to know one, but but let's just wait and see. I think, and I think maybe not an overreaction, but a maybe extremely cautious reaction by the team physician, knowing that there could be something that down the line.
Guys, I want to get to LSU and Mississippi State now. Well, we'll come back to the Saints. We'll talk about the Saints draft, free agency, and I want to get into the Superdome lease extension possibility, and of course the possibility of remaking the dome as well. I want to get into that as we go forward. But let's shift gears now. Let's talk about LSU Mississippi State.
Yes.
Huge series this weekend. You've got a situation where LSU was at 14 straight now that they've won. They swept Mississippi State 3 games in the regular season. I know that when Ari said this week that yes, there should be it's a normal concern when you have to beat a team 5 times in 1 year and you haven't lost to them, but they're focusing on winning 2 games in this series and then going on to Omaha. You've got the Cannizzaro situation here where, again, a guy that knows the hitters, knows the pitchers at LSU, and also is a guy that has done a pretty decent job in his first year at Mississippi State. Jude, I'll start with you. First of all, your thoughts on this series.
The series matches up very well for LSU. There's a reason why they went to Starkville at the end of the regular season and swept this team. They're a better overall baseball team, and really they have all the pieces in place now that you look for in a College World Series championship type club. They have 3 reliable starting pitchers. They've developed enough depth in roles in the bullpen that they can rely on, whether it's a Caleb Gilbert as a long guy, and they look very good at the end of games as well. That's really special when you have a lineup that has a combination of power and speed and puts the ball in play, puts pressure on the opposition. There's a lot to like, and on the Mississippi State side, they're dangerous because they're playing with house money. This is a team that wasn't supposed to get this far. Andy Cannizaro in his first year inherited a pitching staff in particular that was thin. A lot of injuries affected them before they even got started this year, but they've been able to manage, and they sort of started to show those leaks in the ship down the stretch in the regular season. But when they had their opportunity at Southern Miss, talk about stepping up and coming out of the loser's bracket, losing their first game to not the host, not what turned out to be a 50-win team, and beating them twice on the final day. That's a team that might believe that they're a team of destiny. So that's more on their side. I don't think LSU's bothered by the, oh no, we have to beat this team again. They believe they're going to beat them again on their home turf, and they should be confident. So you'll have 2 teams that know each other, that are confident, and LSU will still have the advantage, playing in front of 12,000 fans and playing with, I think, a complete team that has a real chance to win it all.
Yeah. Mike, what can you add?
Yeah, I mean, I think Mississippi State, they have to go in knowing they lost to LSU at home in their final series at their stadium. They got swept. So they know that as well. And they know LSU is the better team. They may not admit it, but they are. But they do have some pop in their lineup, and they are stringing together some good quality pitchers. They have about 8 they can count on. They have a couple starters they can count on. Their bullpen's coming around. But Jude and I were talking before the show. You know, Zach Watson, the freshman, has been lights out. The freshman pitcher, Caleb Gilbert, LSU's bullpen in that 14-game winning streak has come alive. Hunter Newman came back healthy. He's their closer. But all of a sudden, they got that protection Dykeman needed behind him. They moved Watson up in the regional to 5th or 6th in the lineup. Right. And I'm not sure it helped Dykeman in the regional, but I think overall it will. He'll see a lot better pitches now if Watson keeps making teams pay from the pitching around him. So I think that, coupled with the pitching in the last 14 games, is really what springboarded LSU to where they are now. And I think they're better than Mississippi State. Right. Actually, State was a little lucky in that regional.
No doubt.
In the Southern Miss regional, they met some bad plays, bad defense at the worst period, at the worst time. The coach gets kicked out of the final game. So I think they just kind of fell apart, and Mississippi State was the recipient or the beneficiary of that.
You know, Jude, Mike talked about this all season long on my radio show on Fridays about not protecting Dykeman. It was one of the things he talked about over and over again. Talk about that, because I think Mike makes a great point. That's one of the keys to the turnaround on this team, the ability to protect Dykeman in that lineup, where again, what was he walked 10 times against Mississippi State?
Right. In particular, this matchup, Andy Cannizaro knows Dykeman in that lineup as well as anybody, and he did not take any chances. Now, that was Nick Coombs, who is injured, may not play again this weekend after getting banged up early in the regional last week. Coombs was the 5-hole hitter, and he is not a scary batter in a lineup. He's somebody that was providing smart at-bats, but not dangerous ones. What Zach Watson was able to do moving to that spot was tremendous in the regional, and it just happened in the regional. He hit well in the SEC tournament as well. He's got pop showing now to go along with contact skills, speed. He's a tremendous center fielder, and he's been playing their best all-around baseball the last 2 or 3 weeks easily. Now that he's there, we'll see if Cannizaro will pitch around Dykeman and take his chances with Watson. I don't think you'll see that quite as much, anywhere near as careful as 10 walks in 3 games. So that's going to help LSU, because Dykeman can change games with one swing of the bat, and the 3 guys at that bat in front of him. The ability, Kramer Robertson is able to be that table setter, and he's the emotional leader of that team. But you love what you get from Duplantis, and I think Cole Freeman's going to be a guy that surprises on the next level and winds up being a major leaguer one day. He's that good of an all-around player, and you've got those three that constantly put the ball in play and put pressure on ahead of what could be two dangerous power bats. That's what you love to see at the top of the lineup, and that's one of the many reasons why you have to love LSU, not only in this series, but moving forward going to Omaha, because they've got speed guys who put the ball in play in what'll be a big ballpark if they can get there up at TD Ameritrade.
Mike?
A great point about Cole Freeman. He seems like a Kansas City Royals type player. He never strikes out. His second base, he's he's got great range. But the other good thing about Watson moving up in the lineup is behind him you have Smith Papirski, you have Bo Jordan, and then Jake Slaughter comes in, who was really highly touted and kind of slumped throughout the season. But he's got potential. In your 9-hole spot, which is what Watson was, all of a sudden he was in the 9 spot and he was hitting home runs, and he earned his way up the lineup. And a great 9-hole guy sets it up for the guys to come back up behind him. So, I just think what Jude said was right on the money. I just think they're a better team. They have more depth. They have more pitching depth. And I like their chances against this Mississippi State team in the box in a 3-game series.
Right. Talk about pitching.
Pitching, it comes down to, for LSU, do you get the best of your 3 starters so that you can take advantage of the matchups with your relieving core late? Alex Lang was somebody who pitched extremely well at Mississippi State. 7 innings, 11 strikeouts, allowed a run, pitched like an ace. But we saw him against Southeastern, and he was maybe one ball that fell short of yet another home run against Southeastern, away from maybe getting knocked out early in that game. It was a deal where when he gets wild up in the zone, and he's got a good fastball, but it's not something that he can live off of even at this level, despite the fact he'll probably be a second half of the first-round draft pick coming up next week. It's all about his curve. That knuckle curve is maybe the best off-speed pitch in all of college baseball when you hear the analysts. It's that good, but if he can't locate his fastball, then that pitch isn't effective, and he's somebody that can get shelled. The Mississippi State lineup, if they see what we saw from Lang this past Saturday night, they're going to be in business. They're going with Connor Pilkington, who's a lefty who's going to be a first-round pick next year, just a sophomore. He didn't pitch as well as he could have against LSU in the matchup, but only gave up 3 runs on, I believe, 6 innings. So he battled not having his best stuff. If that's reversed, LSU could easily be in a 1-0 hole and have to rely on the combination of Jared Poche and Eric Walker. And right now, senior versus freshman, I trust the freshman more because Walker is consistent and absolutely knows how to locate. The best of Poche, he's a brilliant lefty. But the worst of Poche is a guy who struggles to make it through the lineup once. So we don't know what we're going to see from him either. Defense was bad behind him against Texas Southern, but he kind of got knocked around by Texas Southern. So he has to step up clearly, and he could be pitching with the season on the line in game 2.
And Poche's had his problems in the postseason as the stage got bigger. Now, he had a great super regional a couple of seasons ago, but that's when and like you said, when teams come around that second and third time, they get a beat on what he's doing, that's when he starts to struggle. But Eric Walker has ice water in his veins. His location is unreal. I haven't seen a freshman pitcher be so calm and composed and put the ball exactly where the coach and the catcher asked him to put it. And he got away with one mistake the other night, but other than that, he's been brilliant in the last few starts. I mean, brilliant. So, Pinkerton's really good. I wouldn't be surprised if LSU lost the first game because of Pinkerton. But I don't think they have the depth behind him to sustain LSU for another game.
Talk about the Cannizzaro factor here. The knowledge of the lineup, the knowledge of the pitchers, the knowledge of the program.
Well, I mean, listen, he knows the hitter. He coached them. He coached the hitters for the last few seasons. He knows their strengths and weaknesses. He knows what they can and can't hit. It's going to be up to the pitcher to put the ball in the spot that Cannizzaro wants him to. And that's easier said than done a lot of times. Pinkerton, like you said, he kind of struggled, but he only gave up 3 runs. He bailed himself out a lot, but LSU knew what to expect, or they kind of solved him a little bit. But there's no question about it that he knows the strengths and weaknesses of at least the veterans, not the freshmen. But he did have till November with the freshmen. So he has a little bit of a book on them too. So, but I still think, having said that, I just don't see LSU losing this. Now last year, I was nervous going against Coastal Carolina. I looked at that lineup and I saw home run derby. I saw gorilla ball. I haven't seen guys hit home runs like that since those days. But I don't feel that way this year. I just think LSU's the better team.
What can you add about Canizero?
When you talk about what Canizero brings to the table, it's not going to be a factor of what he knows about LSU, because it didn't help in Starkville. His team was swept, closing down that venerable ballpark. They're totally remodeling it, so they had big crowds there, excited about it, and they were playing to try to keep that ballpark alive another week and host a regional, and LSU wiped them out. So I don't think knowledge is going to come into play helping Canizero against LSU. I think the fact that he is such a great motivator, he's a rah-rah guy who's got a team, say it again, playing with house money. They're not going to be nervous at all. They're trying to pull off an upset. He's going to have his team fired up, going up against a very different kind of coach. Let's talk about what Paul Mainieri is. He is nothing like Skip Bertman was personality-wise, the master motivator. It's a business at LSU. He took over a program that was built, and he made sure that people understand when they come to play that pretend like you're playing in pro ball, because you're battling for your job all the time. So these are battle-tested kids of a different sort. They're almost ready for pro ball before they get there because they played for LSU. And they know they're the favorite, and their fans believe they're going to Omaha now, and there are a great deal of expectations. And that's two very different mindsets coming together, where if things start going against LSU the wrong way, how will they react? You talk about Poche coming back for his senior year. The pressure's on him to deliver. When he fell apart defensively first in a game in Omaha the last time they went a couple of years ago, I mean, that threw LSU off track after Mainieri trusted him to start game one. So he's got some of that in the back of his mind that you wonder how he'll handle it. Whereas Mississippi State, they'll play through their mistakes, they'll give it their best shot, and they're going to be the looser team. So you worry about that as a Tiger fan.
Who do you like?
I like LSU. I think they get the job done. It wouldn't surprise me at all, though, if it goes 3 games, because if it gets to Monday, you like Eric Walker. You just hope, if you're an LSU fan, that not only Walker is able to deliver again like he did, or something like he did against Rice to wrap up last week's regional, but you want to see Hunter Newman not have to be used extensively the first 2 games. And Zach Hess is the X factor out of the bullpen. He can come in and shut people down as a freshman. He has electric stuff. If those 2 guys are available behind Walker, even if it gets to a game 3, advantage LSU. I'd be stunned if Mississippi State swept the Tigers.
Yes, 90. He can hit 97 on his fastball, 88 on that 12-6 curveball. I mean, he's tough. I agree. I think it's LSU squeaks by the first game, and they win Sunday. I don't even think it gets.
You don't think it's the third game?
I don't think so. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Sure. Anything can happen. But I just think it's one of those deals.
Our guest tonight, Jude Young of SportsNola.com and WGSO Radio, Mike Fazende of WGSO Radio. I'm your host, Eric Asher. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. When we come back, we'll talk a little about the possibility of rebuilding the Dome, looking at different scenarios there, the Saints lease, and we'll jump on some Saints and then your phone calls as well. Hopefully we'll get to the Pelicans if we have some time. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Quick break. Don't go anywhere.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Amco Fence, locally owned and operated since 1976. Fully licensed and insured and a member of the BBB, Amco serves both residential and commercial customers. If you're looking to repair, replace, or install a fence for security or aesthetic reasons, Amco Fence supplies wooden, metal, chain link, vinyl, and ornamental or automatic gates. Amco aims to satisfy your fencing needs. Amco Fence, 504-468-9559 or AmcoFenceCompany.com.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. We'll go to the phone lines with about 15 minutes left in the program. Guys, what I thought was an incredible announcement last week, Dennis Lauscha, top executive with the Saints, announced that they're going to start the conversation about Superdome renovations. So I mentioned last week, as I mentioned on the radio show, all of us go back, okay, to the proverbial gun to the head type situation that we saw between the Saints and the state. It was adversarial all the time when it came to the leases. That kind of softened a bit during the Jindal administration because of the relationship between Bobby Jindal and Tom Benson. But it looks like the Superdome Commission, the state government, city government, SMG that runs the Dome, and the Saints are all on the same page here now. Losing 2 back-to-back Super Bowl bids when they were 10 for 10 on the first 10 Super Bowl bids had to be part of this. But it's a conversation that I've thought we've had to have for a long time. The Dome will be 50 years old by the time the Saints lease is up in 2025. We are kind of landlocked here. Everybody wants to talk about the riverfront or maybe the West Bank. I don't personally think it will work. So again, that footprint right there is going to have to be utilized for a sports complex. They are talking about extending the lease now before the 2025 deadline. That's something we've never heard them starting to talk about, 7-8 years out before you even have to deal with that. The Saints the state awarded $422,000 contract to Gelsner Sports out of San Francisco to develop a master plan for the next phase of Superdome renovations. Some of the things they're talking about, obviously, is aesthetically changing things outside the Dome, maybe a grass tailgating area. Some of the things I think that's really interesting about this is finally addressing the terrace level, which they've never done. And they've said over time this is going to be impossible. Possibly moving the press box, maybe in some ground level suites as well. Been talking about that French Quarter facade they've talked about for years and years. But there is a concerted effort with everyone on the same page now to realize that the Dome is going to be 50 years old. It is a flexible building, and it is an icon in our skyline. I mean, again, we're a historic city. We grasp our history and hold it tight. And I can't think in my lifetime of ever seeing that Dome not being in the skyline of the city of New Orleans. I'll take you first, Jude. I think this is as big of a story as any story we're going to have. We look back at the end of the year on the stories of the year. I think this is one of the biggest stories of the year right now.
It's huge because it goes beyond sports, because I think the important thing to remember is that this is a major business story for a city and state that when you talk about Fortune 500 level organizations being here, we simply don't have it. And it's crucial that the Saints stay here, and there's synergy from top to bottom, from city government all the way to Baton Rouge. They understand that this has been a very beneficial relationship, and it's one that all sides want to continue. And it'll be a very important part of New Orleans being the event city it needs to be for it to be successful and for it to be a flagship city making money for the state of Louisiana. It's good to see on the flip side that there's stable leadership. The issues with the LeBlancs appear to be done for good, and we have a feeling that even after Mr. Benson's no longer with us, that Gail Benson is more than comfortable being a New Orleanian who has the most important entities in town. Well, really the Saints, but the Pelicans are huge too. And they're so intertwined now business-wise, whether you talk about Benson Tower and the ability to what they're doing right now, reorganize, whether it was selling Fox 8 and buying into other businesses that we're seeing. They're marrying themselves, as far as economics go, to this area. So there's a commitment on that end, and the state and the city have no reason to do anything but commit back. What it comes down to is there's not anything that we saw from Mr. Benson in the past about building a new stadium and a new location, and the crazy expenses that go with that when you have the perfect location. And it was a matter of, are we tearing the Dome down and starting over, or are we treating it like an icon and being grateful that it's so big that we can do anything inside of it and around it that we need to be modern enough to keep up with the Joneses? There's an understanding of the latter. It's a massive story because synergy's hard to come by economically and politically in this state, in this city. And we're seeing that here, and it's common sense winning out for once.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, it's obvious, it's a no-brainer. They have to work out a deal with the Saints, and they have to do something about the Dome. You know, it's 50 years old, like you said. I think as New Orleanians, though, or para-New Orleanians, you know, Metro, we have to start realizing we're not going to get Super Bowls too much, if ever, because we're not in New Orleans going to build a new stadium. They're just not going to do it. And what happens? New Orleans didn't lose out to other cities; they lost out to new stadiums.
Great point.
So, and then cities are going to build new stadiums. They're in the let's keep building mode. Other than NFL towns, in Las Vegas is going to build a stadium. Sure. LA's building a stadium. Atlanta's got that stadium. I mean, Atlanta's won't be ready. They offered New Orleans to take it, and we can't. We already have the hotels booked, and I think it was the
2021 Super Bowl that's going to Tampa that was at Los Angeles. When Los Angeles,
right?
When Los Angeles,
but didn't they offer it to New Orleans, and New Orleans said no. From what I understand,
I'm not sure about that, Mike. But there is always an issue with Mardi Gras and conventions.
Right.
Always going to be an
issue. If I'm wrong on that, I apologize.
That's why this has to be planned so far in advance.
Exactly.
If New Orleans was contacted, they clearly had to say no. There was no way around it.
It's 2024 is what you're looking at right now. 2024 is the target for the next Super Bowl in New Orleans, and maybe a possibility of 2024, and then maybe 5 years after that, once the renovations are done, and obviously you're in that situation. But let me say this, Mike, and I'll come back to you in a moment. This is a far cry from what we saw just 12 years ago when this team, when Benson and Lauscha and Loomis and Bensel and the triumvirate of the Airline Drive Mafia wanted to take this team and move it to San Antonio. This is a completely different mindset than what we're seeing. Dennis Lauscha, again, and a lot of those guys like Bensel that live in New Orleans, grew up in New Orleans. It was only Arnie Filko that stood up, who was not a New Orleanian, that ultimately, again, blew the whistle on what was going on there. None of those other New Orleanians did. They just kind of nodded their head and went along with the owner of the Saints wanted to do, what Tom Benson wanted to do. So, again, I think it's something that when you look at this now and where we are now, there's a softening there. And I think you made a valid point. They are now marrying themselves economically to the city of New Orleans, where maybe they weren't doing it outside of car dealerships and maybe a bank before.
Right, they had just as many interests in the San Antonio area.
No doubt.
And the LeBlanc family, that was the succession plan. That was a big part of it, and there was no way to trust Rita LeBlanc and her mother to think that they wouldn't take the best deal anywhere. Forget about San Antonio.
Right.
We know about that after the storm, but even after the fact. Now, with so many locals involved, including a local woman married to Mr. Benson, who's going to be the one who essentially inherits the estate. I mean, this is massive because there's an understanding of everything that needed to happen from that point to keep the Saints here. They got the dome open quickly like they had to. They've made the upgrades over time. The city and the state have worked with the Bensons and worked with those two organizations. The Benson Tower deal is a huge deal, and they're going to finally start making money off of that, if and only if they're proactive about the stadium and having the dome attract the events, not only sports but outside of sports, that it needs to year-round so that that's profitable. So it being all intertwined like this, you have to give credit to the political officials involved, because they knew as well, hey, if we get them married to downtown New Orleans, they're not going to give that up. That's massive control and massive money, as long as they're committed to that Superdome landmark spot, and they're apparently committed to the facility as is, as an upgradable building, as opposed to a teardown, which saves everybody money.
Oh, yeah, well, that's billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Billions of dollars.
Yeah, I mean, and you have the idea where they're going to play. I mean, Benson does not want to play at LSU.
No.
He does not. So then you have that issue. But you made a great point about other than Saints venues at the Dome. I think what they've done with Champion Square and the concerts they had there was a brilliant move.
Yes.
Concerts in the Superdome really wasn't that great. I mean, I saw the Stones there, I saw U2. I enjoyed them, but I mean, I felt like, but at Champion Square, it's a more intimate setting, yet you can bring big name acts, and then you have the arena for even bigger names. So I think that's great. I think all of that contributes to the funding and the success of the Superdome and things like that. But As far as 2024, I'm not sure when they have to go out and bid for that. I guess it'd be in 20.
Well, again, the NFL, they send invitations to bid.
Right,
they will send an invitation to a city.
Right.
And you got to believe that the New Orleans will be in that rotation.
And any renovations would have to be done by then.
And which again, I think they're shooting for right now.
And I think you can be quite sure that the tea leaves have been read, and the NFL powers that be have told the officials here, look, if you get this process going so we know it's going to happen well ahead of time, you're probably going to win that 2024 bid. For a while at least, there won't be any new stadiums built in major cities after Las Vegas.
Agreed.
And they're going to get their Super Bowl. We know with LA, Minnesota's gotten one, Atlanta's gotten one. There should be a lull, and clearly with the 49ers as well. All of that's been done. So we're going to have a bit of a lull here and advantage New Orleans, because the tiebreaker that's great is the NFL wants to be here. If all things are equal, I should say, New Orleans wins those battles.
And they keep saying this is our favorite town to host a Super Bowl, but they keep getting further and further apart. So,
well, with good reason, because
of the new
stadiums, right?
And the NBA clearly feels the same way. So guess what, New Orleans? You're doing something right. You should be proud.
Right, and not just that.
Nobody hosts a big event better than the city.
Agreed.
No, not included.
The other part of this is, in the past, it was very difficult to get the Saints to come up with any money for renovations. They are all in now, okay? With the financial situation here in the state of Louisiana, we don't know what it's going to be in 3 to 5 years, 7 years, 8 years out. But the fact that they are now saying, look, we're going to get into a partnership with the state of Louisiana to upgrade this facility. I had Jeff Duncan on my radio show the other day. He also mentioned the NFL getting involved in these renovations as well. So ultimately, again, you're looking at three different entities now that will be coming together to be able to modernize and refurbish this stadium. And it's interesting to see what's going to happen down the line here. 866-3200 is the phone number. Anything's on the table. Saints, LSU, we're talking about the dome renovations, or what we're going to talk about now, which is the New Orleans Pelicans. Guys, a little excited about the Boogie Cousins situation when he came in, because it gives you two players that are top 5 at their position. I kind of wonder about this love affair with Drew Holiday. They seem to be dead set on wanting to bring Drew Holiday back. He doesn't seem to be as much in love with New Orleans, with the Pelicans rather, than they are with him. We'll see what's going to happen right there. But when you watch what's going on in these finals right now, and you look at this juggernaut that are the Golden State Warriors, and you look at the number of all-stars that are on the Cleveland Cavaliers, and you look at the divide now between the have and the have-nots in the NBA, and you look at the mess that the Pelicans have right now in terms of their salary cap, you know, it's going to take some real cap maneuvering to be able to open up cap space, to be able to surround Cousins and Davis within the next 3 to 4 years with players that can put them in a position to be one of the top teams in the Western Conference. I felt really good about this because of the two players that they have, but when I look at what's going on in the NBA right now, I'm a little bit more cautious in saying, wow, unless something really happens where they can get somebody in that can really fix this cap, it may be futile going forward. And I hate to be because I love the NBA and I like the fact that, you know, Anthony Davis is here and hope he'll finish his career here. But man, I mean, you look at what's going on with these super teams right now. I don't know if New Orleans, with the present management, will be able to lure a super team here.
Right, super team's the key term, because I don't know about you guys, but when I was a kid, I loved watching Super Friends, right? That cartoon, all the superheroes get together and win in the end, and that's what's happened in the NBA, because those guys are now all friends, and they all want to get together and win in the end and get their rings, and there's no stigma anymore about, well, you had to go and, you know, Kevin Durant, you had to go and join the Warriors to get your ring. They don't think that way. They just want that resume at the end of their career, right, and they want that success. Mm-hmm. So now you've got Chris Paul talking to one of the top teams, the San Antonio Spurs. All those reports have probably a lot of fire with that smoke. You know, the Celtics have built a nice team, and they're open for business to be able to add a star in a major market. So adding that on top of LeBron's not going anywhere, at least for a little while longer, and what the Warriors are, it's frustrating because the top of the mountain is blocked. It's not like the NFL where there's parity, and if you have the right quarterback and a good front office and a good coach, you've got a chance, and you can turn things around relatively quickly as long as you're not the Cleveland Browns. Everybody else seems to be able to figure out to have a good team every few years.
Right.
That's not the case in the NBA because so few players, there's 5 on the court, so few players make such a big difference. And it's working against New Orleans that 1, players don't see this as a destination city where they want to live. And 2, to make up for that, we haven't built the capital as far as being regularly successful like a San Antonio to be able to overcome that. And we don't have a superstar born in our backyard that we're able to draft and then get to come back like LeBron James so that Cleveland could overcome that. Those are rare situations. So the ceiling for this team, even with 2 all-star big men, we're just going to have to deal with it and see if that's enough, which is, hey, can we get over 50 wins and be a playoff team and maybe win a series? But you know what? A lot of teams in the league are facing the exact same thing.
Right.
Will that be enough to get? Yeah. Will that be enough to get butts in the seats? Unfortunately, we're in the difficult conference, and it's been the difficult conference for over a decade. More difficult by far. So that makes things harder, where you can't be mediocre and still at least make the postseason. Fans, I think, realize that, and they're savvy enough. If they're entertained, they feel like their team gives them a chance. At least they can go to the arena and see a team win more than they lose. Those are baby steps at this point. I think more people will come out because the NBA is a winning product nationally right now. It's the young person's major sport, and that's why it's doing so well. And the big TV contract gives the Pelicans security that even if they're losing a little bit at the box office, the Benson family's making money.
I think the butts will be in the seats.
Yeah.
They're a winning team. I think New Orleans comes out and supports a winning NBA team. The question is, with Anthony Davis wanting to win a championship one day, can this franchise provide that, Mike?
Well, I mean, listen, Jude hit on a lot of points and a lot of correct points. But sooner or later, even the Golden State Warriors will get older. Injuries play a fact. You never know for sure. Yeah, these are super teams, but and they're playing great ball. Probably the best season ever for a team in the Warriors. But I always take the attitude is you never know what's going to happen as far as injuries. Somebody could just, their play could just start diminishing, whatever. And but you made a great point in that New Orleans isn't a destination for star players. It just isn't. I was looking at point guards early because what if they lose Holiday? And the kid Lowry for the Raptors, they had one columnist wrote 5 destination spots. New Orleans wasn't even a thought in this columnist's mind.
A lot of it is cap related.
Well, whatever.
But not really. I think it comes down to you asked the question to start the segment. Why are the Pelicans seemingly so enamored with Drew Holiday? Well, he's plan A because he's here. And after plan A, plan B is pretty bad. It's getting your hands on maybe a backup point guard. If you don't keep Drew Holiday, you might be starting a Darren Collison at point guard and paying him more than you want to pay him. To be a middling,
which you did last year.
third of the league. Bottom third of the league point guard that ties up more money. And you don't have another first-round pick to work with again, and you're stuck against the cap. So, I mean, I understand why they're begging Holiday to come. They may get a package deal to let him bring his brother Justin here as well, who's just an okay player. But if you keep Holiday and you've got another guard who at least fits and can play and should have pretty good chemistry between the two of them, you can take one step forward. And hope is all you need because of the things you mentioned, injuries and age. At least put yourself in position to be the next man up.
To be there when this starts to happen to the Cavaliers or the Warriors in your look at the Spurs. I mean, they lost Tim Duncan. Okay, they make the playoffs still, but they got swept by the Warriors. I mean, so it's not like these teams are going to be great forever and these players are going to be great forever. And like Jude said, put yourself in position to be that team to take that next step. And if you lose a Holiday, okay, who are the other guys you can maybe bring in? I mean, I'm looking at maybe Jeff Teague or even Patty Willis from the Spurs is an unrestricted, and he can come in and just run the offense for you. Maybe something you need, a true point guard. I don't think Holiday is the true classic point guard in the sense of what we're used to seeing, like a Chris Paul type. So I think he's better too, to be honest with you. But
I like Patty Mills, but they also need shooters. And that's one of the things they're going to have to figure out in this offseason. They're going to have to surround these big guys with shooters.
As well.
Agreed.
But if you don't really have that.
And if you're paying Drew Holiday to make around $25 million a year, how are you going to get that facilitator to join him in the backcourt so they can at least take turns and he can play off the ball more and focus on being an elite defender? And how are you going to get those veteran shooters? And why would they come here when they can go to better teams, the ones later in their career? I mean, J.J. Redick, he's not going to come here.
And then the difference between when teams fall on hard times, building through the draft, and we've seen Golden State do it, we've seen Cleveland do it, you're seeing Boston do it with all the draft choices that they've acquired. The Pelicans front office, as it stands today, they don't have the patience for the draft. And of course, I've got mixed feelings on it as well, because a lot of these guys that are coming out of college at 19, you don't even know what you're going to get out of them for 3 to 4 years. For every Anthony Davis, you got 10 other players that languish at the end of a bench. Right,
and what happens if that desperation, because Demps is working for his job year to year at this point, and it's been like that for a while, so that has an effect on his decision making. It has to. Alvin Gentry's certainly in the same spot because this is the Boogie Cousins year for both of them, and so what do you do? How do you make these decisions when you should be thinking long term? I think Pelicans fans should be mad if one thing happens this offseason that should not happen unless it really brings in a dynamic third guy to join the two superstars, and that is if they trade Cheikh Diallo, because that's the one guy who could develop, who would have been a lottery pick this year, who could develop into a force, a star, a major asset if they're patient. But if they throw him into a deal just to try to get a little better, those are the type of mistakes that handcuff you for years, and they've made mistakes like that already.
Right. They're not a patient front office.
No.
At all. And I understand Mr. Benson getting up in age, wanting to be able to bring a winner to the city. We all want a winner in the city. But at the same time, you look at the teams that are in the championship now. Yes, they've added players after they've gotten to the pinnacle, players that want to come and they know they're going to tag on, jump on to be a championship. But the genesis of those teams were in the lottery, picking quality players and allowing those players to develop.
Right, and you have to come up with the Draymond Greens working out.
Yes.
So you can have that core. You have to have the 2 draft picks that become the star backcourt that Golden State has. They drafted these guys. Yeah. So that's usually the way most of these cities that haven't been winning have to go. And the Pelicans have tried to cheat it. And they've tried to speed up the process, and they got damaged goods with Drew Holiday. They got damaged goods and not a really good fit in Tyreke Evans, who's a good stats guy on a bad team. That's what he was always going to be, and people scratched their heads and said, you really think you're going to make more out of a guy who can't shoot and only shares the basketball at times because he's trying to get his? No offense to the guy. He helped them get to the playoffs that one time. He carried them down the stretch. They had to have him because Holiday wasn't there. But he wasn't going to win you that series.
Right. And then the Ashik deal, which again is still an albatross around this team's neck. Hope is that something can happen there. Mike, anything you can add to that?
Well, I mean, if it would help if they were good at something. They're not good at drafting, and they're not good at making deals, except for the Cousins deal. Okay, that was a great deal. Anthony Davis fell in their lap, pretty much. So they need somebody in that front office who knows the NBA, who can scout and judge talent, be it coming from college. I mean, Draymond Green was a second-round pick.
Oh, yeah.
Isaiah Thomas was a late first-round pick. I mean, you need somebody that's
Klay Thompson was the 11th pick in the draft.
Right.
I mean, compare that with Rivers, who was the 10th pick in the draft. Okay.
I mean, it's not like they were lottery picks.
Right.
And the Spurs have hit on late first-round picks because they have to, because they're good.
They're good.
That's how they're going to get young talent.
And they stash players in Europe as well.
Correct.
One of the things
which we thought Dell Demps was going to do because of his background over there.
Absolutely.
And it hasn't happened.
Hasn't happened. So
be good at something. That's all we ask.
And let's hope. Look, again, I don't want to be a pessimist, but when watching this series right now and seeing how far away this team is and knowing the salary cap restraints they have on them this season and maybe next season, and then the clock is running with Anthony Davis, it just scares you a little bit knowing that there's a possibility that another superstar could walk out of this town and end up possibly winning a championship elsewhere.
Right. Hope is not a plan, Eric.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Jude Young, Mike Fazende, thanks so much for being with us tonight on Inside New Orleans Sports.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night at 10 o'clock right here on WLAE, 9 o'clock on Pelican, and we're on the Cox cable tier now, so you can catch us at 10 o'clock on Thursday nights and 2 a.m. on Saturday mornings. Catch me on the radio, 990 a.m. WGSO, that's weekdays, 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. The TuneIn Radio app is a great way to take the show with you anywhere. Also, you can listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com. You can catch every previous episode of Inside New Orleans Sports at ericasher.com as well. I want to thank our guests, Jude Young and Mike Fazende. Also, the WLA production staff: Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Kenny Juno, Naila Jones, Christy Smith, and of course my director, William Hill. Thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you out next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.
You're watching WLAE-TV, Channel 32 in New Orleans. You're watching WLAE-TV, Channel 32 in New Orleans. You're watching WLAE-TV, Channel 32 in New Orleans.